Discover more music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. Audacy.
Load podcasts.
The Pentagon is concerned the continuing military aid to Ukraine could trigger an ammunition shortage.
U.S. defense officials are trying to cobble together creative solutions to prevent future shortages, given the fast burn rate of weapons needed in Ukraine, even pulling from U.S. weapons stockpiles in South Korea and Israel. Congressman Adam Smith of the House Armed Services Committee told Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday he's concerned about keeping up pace with Ukraine's needs.
We need to increase that ability to surge when we need it, which means we desperately need to increase our manufacturing base for key weapon systems.
The Pentagon is racing to boost its production of 155mm artillery shells by 500% within 2 years, production levels not seen since the Korean War. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
Several congressional Republicans have written President Biden to tell him his refusal to negotiate spending cuts in exchange for an increase in the country's debt ceiling is a non-starter.
22 Republican senators are expressing concern about the nation's growing national debt and opposition to raising the debt ceiling without, quote, real structural spending reform that reduces deficit spending. Those Republicans made the statement in a letter sent to President Joe Biden, who's been adamant about the need to raise the debt ceiling to avoid defaulting on the nation's debt, which he believes would have dangerous consequences for the economy. President Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are scheduled to meet Wednesday to discuss the debt ceiling. On Capitol Hill, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
The state of Alabama is making plans to release about 400 prison inmates several months before their sentences are over. They must under a new state law passed in 2021 and about to take effect. The state's attorney general has asked the court to issue an order blocking their release, saying at least 50 of the inmates are serving time for murder or manslaughter. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizama. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best. Looking for a new home or that special place to spend your retirement? Century 21 Realty Management has the place for you. Ladera Towers Condominium in Manila. Luxury living you deserve. Amenities like a gourmet kitchen, a large jacuzzi tub, private lanai with a magnificent ocean view, and 24/7 security. Other amenities, large swimming pool, couple of tennis courts, 3-bedroom condo units are available right now. This is an opportunity you should look at now before they're all gone. Call us now at Century 21 Realty Management, 647-5003, or visit the website, LaderaTowerGuam.com or GuamProperties.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what I always say, isn't it, Jose? You better not infringe those constitutional rights if you know what's good for you.
Start of every Tall Tales.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a good way to start a radio talk show. Okay, so here we go again on another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. I start with Zemi Ikotny. Yesterday, the Daily News actually got a blue star. But of course, we can't expect the Daily News to get two in a row. So today it's more of the same old stuff, right? Pito Terlahi, may he rest in peace. Former senator, former National Guardsman, U.S. Army veteran, former mayor of Jonia. And here's what the Daily News has to say about Jose Pito Terlahi. Had a strong history of public service. On Monday, Guam said goodbye to a man who protected the nation as a soldier in wartime, who protected his community as a police officer, who led his village as a mayor, who led the mayor's council as president, and who finished his career by serving 2 terms in the legislature. For more than half a century, he served the island in some capacity. Jose Pito Terlahi died at the age of 76. Terlahi grew up in Pulanta, Jonia, a proud son of the village. He joined the Army and served in the Vietnam War, being awarded the Soldier of the Year recognition during his service. He went on to serve 16 years with the police department. According to Senator Frank Blas, Terlahi was a former head of the narcotics division of the police department. He's a graduate of the DEA's Drug Enforcement Academy. He served as Director of Civil Defense and was Vice President of the National Energy Management Association Pacific Region. Terlahi went on to be elected mayor of his beloved village of Jonia in 2000 and was reelected for 2 more consecutive terms, serving a total of 12 years. According to a statement from the Mayor's Council of Guam, Terlahi served as Vice President of the Mayor's Council in 2002 and 2006, President of the Association of Mariana Island Mayors, Vice Mayors and elected municipal council members in 2004, and President of the Mayor's Council of Guam in 2008. Then Mayor Pito Terlahi was a strong advocate of a safe community and promoted numerous programs for the youth of Jonia and was involved in various sports leagues around the island. Jonia rules and Hita became his mottos and ensured that all best practices be implemented in Jonia, become a model village for other villages to follow. Mayor's Council of Guam Executive Director Angel Sablan said in the news release, when most people would be retiring, Terlahi ran for a higher office, serving as a senator in the 35th and 36th legislatures. Jose Terlahi was a true public servant. We'll remember and honor his spirit of service to our community. All right. Jose Terlahi, rest in peace. Okay, let's take a look at the card. And of course, the first item on the card is what I've got to do to make Guam great again. We've been through the whole story about the Proud Boy wannabes, manatees, wannabes, etc., and the possible accusation that I was a Proud Boy wannabe and that I would spout such things as, let's make Guam great again. Well, I never did, but I should have, because it's a darn good idea. So now every day on the show, I give you some idea of what I'm going to do to make Guam great again. I'm up to 10 on my list now, starting out with combat governmental identity politics, moving on to advocate an effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services on at least a break-even basis. Number 3, back the stationing of Marines on the island. 4, champion free speech. 5, root out systemic racism. 6, encourage a market economy and free enterprise. 7, combat abortion. 8, keep our government honest. 9, fight separatism. 10, oppose anti-militarism. Those are 10 of the things that I'm going to do to make Guam great again. It was great before We took a really hard fall during the pandemic when our governor basically shut the private sector down, shut transparency down, took huge amounts of money from the national government and spent it in ways that I don't think anyone who wasn't part of the government approved of, and it kind of left us all standing around wondering, how did she get away with that? Okay, so that's a kind of a requirement on the card. Then I move on to systemic racism. After that, I've got Dr. Lobeck versus Kaneshiro and Radu, which I started on yesterday, but I didn't have my papers with me. Then we go to pre-condemnation landowners versus taxpayers. And then we've got Troy versus the Post, the Daily News, KUAM, PNC, and Pacific Island Times. And he beat the tar out of all of them, didn't he? Not even close. And I've got Patrick Artero versus the Department of Agriculture. And then Carl, remember there, once upon a time, leading into the 2018 election, we had three Carls that used to call the program quite frequently. There was our Carl, also known as the most dangerous man in the room. And then there was someone who presented himself as Carl, who was known as another Carl. And then there was just Carl, also known as the Carl. So, when you have the real McCoy, you don't have to specify the real McCoy. It's just the others. You have to say, if I say Carl, I'm talking about Carl Gutierrez. There's only one Carl. And there's no possibility of confusing Carl Gutierrez or Carl with our Carl. Although our Carl is, being the secret agent that he is such a master of disguises, I wouldn't put it past him to disguise himself to look like the real Carl just to see what kind of secret information he could gather. They don't call him the most dangerous man in the room for nothing. Okay, then we've got Russia versus Ukraine, Scottish first to rule of law, etc. Some old items on the card. Finally got around to cleaning up some of the old items yesterday. But let's go back to Dr. Lobeck and Kaneshiro and Radu. Wait a minute, I better start at the beginning here. At the beginning, I start out with Public Law 80, as you were, 36-34. And what I do is I look through the classified ads, mostly now in the Post, because I'm not so sure the Daily News is a newspaper of general circulation anymore. And if I don't find somebody, some agency that screwed up the open government law, sometimes I stumble on something that's really interesting, which is what happened today. And this is a notice of the meeting on Wednesday, February 1 at 2:30 of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. And there's only one item on that agenda. And this is it. Details as you were. Yes, it's a MOU between the Office of the Attorney General, Department of Land Management, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Now, I don't think anything good can come from this. So you got the Attorney General, Land Management, Chamorro Land Trust, and Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Now, what kind of a possible MOU could these guys be cooking up? Now, my suspicious mind tells me that it's this. You'll recall that part of an agency in the U.S. Department of Justice brought suit against the Chamorro Land Trust Commission because for discrimination. Only giving leases to Chamorros was found to be racially discriminatory. And suit pending in the district court. The government of Guam hired Mike Phillips and put him an assistant attorney general on the case. They sat down with lawyers from the Department of Justice and came up with a settlement, part of which was to dismiss that case. And the settlement came out to this. When the Chamorro Land Trust Commission was first created, in order to be eligible for a lease from the commission, you had to come forward and show that you were Chamorro. In other words, you needed things like birth certificates or whatever, so that you could show that somewhere back in your ancient history, there was someone of what we might refer to as Chamorro blood.
Oh, not the size of your Sanahi.
No, not the. Although it might have been a good.
It almost made the list.
It almost made the list, yeah. And as far as I recall, we go by the old Jim Crow one drop of blood rule here on Guam. Back during the Jim Crow days, you know, when we were, and at least in the Democrat Solid South, really discriminating against black people. The rule was you didn't have to do a lot of tracing of ancestors, because if you could go back 4 great-grandparents and find somebody who was 1/8 African-American, that was enough, because 1 drop of Negro blood, you were a Negro. And I suspect that that's the same rule that we use here, Jose, that if you can go back to your great-grandfather and determine that he had a Chamorro mother, that's good enough. But that's what you needed to be able to show in order to be eligible for a Chamorro land trust. The settlement said you can't do that, even though you've embarked on dealing with people as original inhabitants. Too late, too little, too late. So the new rule is, in order to be eligible for a Chamorro land trust lease, you must be able to show that you own real property that was taken by the United States in eminent domain before 1968, that you or your ancestors held fee title to that land, or that you ranched or farmed that land, or that your ancestors ranched or farmed the land. And I don't know exactly what they're up to. I don't have the time to go in and sit in their meetings. But they've had items in their agenda like delegating authority to the executive director to approve affidavits. So, I kind of suspect that what they said was, well, if somebody just swears, that he raised a carabao on Blackacre in 1967, Sota Prim, let it go. Just let it go. We're not going to be real tough on any of this stuff. And there was also a story about someone who came to the Land Trust Commission who was referred to the Ancestral Lands Commission. And the reason was the Ancestral Lands Commission has all of the maps, which of course is true, because the Ancestral Lands Commission is supposed to be able to take land that was at one time owned by a petitioner, was taken by the United States government in eminent domain, then returned to the government of Guam, which quitclaimed the land to the Ancestral Lands Commission, which was then supposed to deed that property to the pre-condemnation owner. In order to do that, of course, they would have to have access to maps showing who owned what at the time of condemnation. So it would make sense that someone who claimed eligibility for a Chamorro land trust lease would be able to go to Ancestral Lands and say, my grandfather owned Blackacre on the outskirts of Agate. The lot number is 472. Yeah, there it is. So that's the new scheme. Being Chamorro doesn't do it for you. You have to fit into the new criteria. So my sense is this: when I look at this MOU, I suspect that there's a Sota Prim dimension here, and the graybeards of land management, Chamorro Land Trust, and Ancestral Lands have tried to figure out some way to make it easy to give the land back to the original owners. And if they can't, give them a pocket full of money. So I'm going to see if I can get a hold of that MOU. I suspect that it's probably a personnel matter, so I can't get it, right, Jose?
To make it difficult, they're archiving it at the port.
Exactly. Yeah, but there's a sign at the entrance to the headquarters of the port. If you want to get any public records for us, you'll have to sue Rory. Just go ahead and sue Rory. Okay, so that's item. I'm going to keep my eye on that one. And then we go from there to systemic racism. And today I have a printout of the website for the Red Rice restaurant in in Vegas. Remember, yesterday I told you about the new restaurant in Vegas called Red Rice. It was opened by, Cutmans and Frank Tenorio, and they call the restaurant, it's just Red Rice. That's the name of the restaurant. And guess what they have on their menu? I suspect they have red rice. Here's a printout from their website. Okay, now if you're looking at that on Facebook, it's not what you see. It's what you don't see. So I'm attempting to communicate with the folks at Red Rice. I'm really happy for them for starting up a Chamorro-style restaurant in Vegas. Next time in Vegas, I will make sure that I pay a visit, dressed in my Tall Tales uniform, of course. And I kind of threw it out there that anyone who's in communication with Cotman and Frank ought to let them know that I've been picking on them here in Tall Tales because it's really good advertisement for them. And I will continue to pick on them so long as I know that they are tailgaters, or at least tailgater. What would a tailgater wannabe look like? Probably be that animal that we hypothesized wearing a tailgater T-shirt, right? Maybe we should maybe we should try to do
put a
that.
shirt on the wannabe.
Yeah, and put it up on Rogues Gallery, right? Okay, so I finally got into Facebook here. And so first item on the card, you'll recall I put this on the card yesterday as Dr. Lobeck and Kaneshiro and Radu. And Kaneshiro and I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the place of the parent of Dr. Ina Lobeck or the parent of Dr. Kaneshiro or Dr. Radu, and tell me how much pride you would feel in the work that your daughters are doing for you. Kaneshiro and Radu are gynecologists from Hawaii, University of Hawaii, came to Guam, very quickly got admitted to practice in Guam so they could have standing to be plaintiffs in the ACLU lawsuit against us, allowing them to be able to sell chemical abortion medicine from their comfortable suites in Honolulu. And since that time, the reports are there have been about 5 chemical abortions per month here on the island. This to me, these people who are gynecologists went to med school to learn how to deal with women who are pregnant, to help them through the pregnancy, and I suppose help them get pregnant, help them through the pregnancy, help them bear children. And they've just thrown it all away and embarked on careers as doctors who will, for a price, kill babies in utero. Okay, so that's Kaneshiro and Radu. Now let's contrast that with Dr. Lobeck, okay? This is a story I picked up from Kenosha News. I still follow Kenosha News, Jose. This is by a guy named David Wahlberg. When Phoebe Andrella, Phoebe Andrella was 23 weeks pregnant with twins, one baby started sending blood and nutrients to the other, a rare condition that threatened to kill both before they were born. Until March, when University of Wisconsin Health started doing surgery on fetuses, Andrella from Menominee, Michigan, just north of Marinette, Wisconsin, would have had to go to Chicago or elsewhere outside Wisconsin to address the emergency. But in Madison in August, UW Health's Dr. Ina Lobeck made a small incision on Andrella's belly and snaked a thin scope into her uterus, where the surgeon used a laser to close the dangerous connections between the still developing babies. The twins, born November 1 in Green Bay, are thriving at home, where Andrella and her husband, Chad, C-H-A-D, not to be confused with Chad, Jose, now have 4 sons. They're sleeping and eating and growing, said Phoebe, whose older boys are 7 and 2. It's like nothing ever happened with the twins, Chad said. UW Health became one of about 24 U.S. centers doing a range of fetal surgeries. Yeah, now, of course, I suspect that Radu and Kaneshiro can do fetal surgeries too, right? If they can't sell their chemical abortions, can't sell enough chemical abortions. Lobeck, who was trained in the specialty, arrived in September 2021. 6 months later, UW Health opened its Fetal Diagnosis and Treatment Center. What a wonderful thing, huh? And it happened in Wisconsin, of all places. Children's Wisconsin Hospital near Milwaukee did fetal surgeries until a few years ago and still does various interventions before and during birth. It hopes to start fetal surgeries again soon. The most common condition for which fetal surgery is performed is the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, or TTTS, in which blood flow between identical twins that share a placenta becomes unbalanced. The Andrellas had a variation of the condition known as twin anemia polycythemia sequence, or TAPS, in which one twin has too few red blood cells and the other has too many, which can cause both hearts to work too hard. Going on, we're extremely selective with offering fetal surgery, said Lobeck, noting that the UW Meritor team has evaluated more than 30 patients since the center opened and performed surgery on 10. Fetal surgery is increasingly done, listen to this, to repair spina bifida, which I suspect probably was a good candidate for the other kind of fetal surgery, right? Another type of surgery is called ex utero intrapartum treatment, or EXIT. The head and neck of the baby are delivered through an incision in the uterus so a blocked airway can be cleared, such as by removing a large mass from the neck before the rest of the baby is delivered. In addition to such surgeries, UW Meritor Center manages other heart, urinary, spinal cord, lung, gastrointestinal defects, some of which are operated on after birth. They include gastroschisis, in which the intestines develop outside the body. The Andrellas knew TTTS was possible as Dr. Edward Hayes, their OBGYN in Green Bay, monitored pregnancy. When Hayes saw something amiss on the ultrasound in August, he sent them to Madison, where Phoebe Andrella underwent surgery the next day at Meritor. Now, this could have been this. He sent them to Minnesota or Illinois, right? Where the unfortunate twins could have been aborted because they would have no quality of life, right? to save the mother's life. One twin, Shay, was anemic from giving blood and transfusion to the other twin, Carter, who was receiving hazardous excess of blood cells. Twins who share a placenta typically share some blood vessels, but the Anderla baby boys had imbalanced vessels in a no man's land that usually serves as a break between babies. Both of their hearts were working very hard. They're both at risk of death at that point. With assistance from Dr. Beninati, a maternal fetal medicine specialist at UW Health, Lobeck positioned her scope in the no man's land and closed the blood vessels with the laser. The Anderlas went home 2 days later. Except for a follow-up visit in Madison a week later, they received the rest of their care in Green Bay at Aurora Bay Medical Center. The twins were delivered at just under 35 weeks, a few weeks early, on purpose, at about 4.5 pounds. Carter was on oxygen for a few days, and both twins stayed in neonatal intensive care for 3 weeks. Since they went home just before Thanksgiving, they've been healthy, giving Phoebe and Chad the challenges and joys of parenthood. Mom and Dad are not getting as much sleep as we would like, Phoebe Anderla said, but they're great. We're really happy to be a family of 6. What a wonderful story, huh? What a wonderful story. You know what I'd like to do? Maybe I'll do this in my next trip. I'll go to Honolulu and I'll hunt down Kaneshiro and Redu and read this to them, you know? I mean, this is enough to make anybody's tummy warm, isn't it? Medical science, you know, the leading edge of OBGYN, a great result for everyone involved. And then look at these two, Kaneshiro and Redu.
It wasn't choosing what flavor coffee you're having that day, or whether to wear matching socks, or even if I was going to take the left turn to work today or take the long route.
Whether I was going to take the Lexus or the Chevrolet to work today. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. It's just, you know, the longer this goes on, the sadder it becomes, Jose. And unfortunately, this story about Dr. Lobeck just increases the sadness of the whole thing, about what we could be doing, what we should be shooting for at our hospital, right? Instead, we got a governor who sends her pit bull out to recruit abortionists to come to the island. Yeah. Now, if these two twins were going to die, had they not had this special surgery, what would Lou Leon Guerrero do? Yeah, because even a baby who's lying in front of a doctor, you know, on the table, you're supposed to just let him die.
It just costs too much money.
It just costs too darn much money. So this was a great story, and I'm so happy to hear that it happened in Wisconsin. We don't permit abortion in Wisconsin, and the game is heating up because the Wisconsin Supreme Court is one justice conservative right now, and they're going to elect a new justice. They elect justices to the Supreme Court there, and guess what? The campaign's all about. Yeah.
Yeah, and day by day, these kind of stories keep whittling away at the arguments that the pro-abort choose as it's just a blob of tissues, and it feels no pain. It's just cells. It's not even recognizable as a human. Well, what the heck are we doing surgery in utero then?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that we're doing surgery on? A lifeless blob of tissue or a human being?
But you know, Jose, you start out with what we talk about almost every day here. It's never okay to take the life of a helpless, innocent human. Never. So in order to justify that, you almost have to get into the once upon a time fairy tales, things that no one is going to really take very seriously, but it at least darkens the consciences of the pro-aborts. Well, you know, before the first few weeks is just a blob of tissue. And, you know, a woman has a right to control her own body. And the government can't come along and tell her how to like that congressman yesterday. It's not the government's womb, it's the woman's womb. They have to come up with this stuff that doesn't get past even the rudiments of anything halfway logical.
Well, I believe that it's really difficult to admit to yourself, let alone a crowd of people you're trying to elect you or even put you in a position, to say, yeah, I do believe it's okay to kill an innocent, helpless human being.
Yeah.
And that's where they're going to have to stand on.
But, of course, they don't want to say that. They want to describe it in 17 other different ways, right? Yeah. Well, anyhow, let's take a short break here, and we'll come back to the card.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, here we go. Next item on the card is pre-condemnation owners, landowners versus taxpayers. And before I get into that, I'm going to finish an article that I started on yesterday, which was Waterworks versus Cortec. You remember that? And I spent a fair amount of time explaining a mechanism that we use here called a certificate of title, which is a piece of paper. And I went through and told you that, in order to get a certificate of title on a piece of land, if the land isn't registered, then you have to go through a land registration proceeding. And the way you do that is you get maps, surveyors, a lawyer, and you petition the court to grant you a certificate of title. Once you have that certificate of title, then you get into the stuff I talked about yesterday, fee simple, memorials, et cetera, et cetera. And this system was designed back in the day when we didn't have any way to do any kind of records except pieces of paper. Of course, that's not the case anymore. And the certificate of title system, as invented by a man named Torrens, Torrens, from Australia, the way it was set up was you had to pay a fee for the issuance of a certificate of title, for the addition of a memorial, etc. Those fees all went into a pot to insure the property upon which a certificate of title was issued. So if a certificate of title was issued in error, and because of that, a certificate holder lost his real property, there would be money there to either compensate him or enough money to file suit or whatever. But when we adopted the Torrens system here, the first thing we did was do away with that fund that was supposed to underlie the certificate of title mechanism. Now, if the certificate of title worked the way it's supposed to, there wouldn't be any title insurance companies. because in a sense the certificate of title was was title insurance. But that's just not the way it works now, because there have been so many problems with the mechanism. This whole thing at the waterworks being one of them. And you remember we started out here a couple of weeks ago. I had an article about how the Ancestral Lands Commission said, well, yeah, we made a mistake there because we gave these guys a deed and said, you got to clear it with the courts. And they gave the deed to Cortec, remember that? And they were bamboozled, fababbed, however you want to say it. And this whole thing with wastewater treatment plant evolved from there. Now, of course, to start with, we had real property that was returned to the Torres family, not Torrens, pursuant to, the property was declared excess, given to the Ancestral Lands Commission. They gave it to the Torres, and after a couple of transactions, it wound up with Cortec. So this whole thing is a classic example of you start out with a bad system, don't expect to get a good result out of it in the end. So that's where we are with that. I'm sure I'll be spending more time talking about the waterworks, but right now I want to go back to the Ancestral Lands Commission, which showed for sure that it didn't know what it was doing in conveying that real property that is now hotly contested in this Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant case. Here's an article that ran in today's paper that I call Pre-Condemnation Owners versus Taxpayers. The headline is, Governor, give millions a year to ancestral land owners. Now, I don't know what it's going to take, and I suspect there's no way to do it. But the papers and the TV stations have to take a huge chunk of blame on this, because they're giving they're giving something to the pre-condemnation owners that doesn't make sense. If I own Blackacre and the national government came along and condemned Blackacre in fee simple, which is what the national government does, the national government takes all of the rights to Blackacre to use it for a public purpose. And when the national government is finished with it, there are ways of disposing of that land. First, the national government would offer it to any other federal agency that could use it. That failing, it offers it to state and local governments. You want to know when the national government would say, let's quit claim this back to the pre-condemnation owners, Jose? Never. You know, I can't say that I've done an exhaustive search, but I've never heard of such thing. Now, there have been times when the national government would take less than a fee, so there might be a reversion in the pre-condemnation owners, but that's not the case we're dealing with here. All of the condemnations were in fee simple. So if there's a piece of real property out there in the Eagles Field area, I have as much right or have much interest in the title to that real property as the descendant of the pre-condemnation owner, which is none at all. None. It is, if it's anything, it's not even a mere expectancy. So we somehow got it through our heads here that we've got to run around jumping through our butts to figure out how to get that land from the national government and then give it to the pre-condemnation owners. Now, the media is complicit here because they don't explain it like I just explained it. They've come up with terms like ancestral landowners. What does an ancestral landowner own? Tadza? Taitano? Nya?
Not even a certificate of title?
Nothing. Yeah, they don't have a certificate of title with a memorial that says subject to condemnation by a U.S. government. No, they have nothing. And they go with ancestral landowners or original landowners. Well, the original landowner probably would have been someone who took a a patent from the Spanish government back before the Spanish-American War. I don't think anybody, I think that'd be a pretty hard one to trace. Now, I haven't been able to knock this down, but I've heard that the Spanish land tenure rules on Guam were not the same as ours. And basically, pre-Spanish-American War, the Spanish government would allow people to use the land, to occupy it for a term certain, kind of a sharecropper type organization, but not fee simple title to the land. So there may very well be no original titles. Now, some of the titles, I'm not going to mention the name, but there's a family that owned a lot of land pre-condemnation in the north that bought the land at tax sales. Because during the naval administration, there was a tax on real property, and if you didn't pay the tax, the naval government would sell it to the highest bidder. And folks who had a little change in their pocket got some land for some really low prices. And of course, that land was just that. It was a Tongan ranch. No one paid a whole lot of attention to it until the security clearance came off and Japanese tourists started to arrive. Then all of a sudden, land began having value. Before that, back in the early 60s, if it wasn't in Tamuning on what we called Marine Drive at that time, it probably wasn't worth very much. I remember, I'm not going to mention his name either, but I remember a man who owned the real property where the Hyatt is located now, who sold it in the late 60s to someone who flipped it and finally sold it to Hyatt. And the seller to the flipper said, when I first sold it, I felt kind of guilty because I got $25,000 for that land. So, the values were really, really low. So I get a kick out of these people who say, yeah, when they took the land from my great-grandfather, they only paid him 10 cents a hectare for it. What do you think it was worth? So at the time the land was taken by the national government in eminent domain, you can read the Constitution, which will tell you in the Fifth Amendment, where is it? Yeah. No person shall be held to answer for a capital otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, et cetera, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So certainly after August 1, 1950, the law required a payment of just compensation for the land that was taken. Land that was taken before that, you got an argument, but you got to make it. You can't just engage in serial bitching and hoping for a good result. But certainly after August 1, 1950, the national government had to pay just compensation for that land. And as I've explained so many times before, in 1978, the national government paid for that land again because Mr. Wampet was able to get a bill through Congress that would compensate people whose land was taken by eminent domain. And they didn't have to come up with proofs that there was any unfairness or illegality, just that they wanted more money. And $39 million was paid out the second time the national government paid for the land.
The late 70s, $39 million was paid out.
Yep.
Wow.
And that's a pretty good chunk of money.
Yes, it
In the
is.
late 70s, yeah. So now here we are again, people that got paid for the land twice. Well, you got to give land back to the original owners. In the Daily News, well, how about giving the land back to the ancestral owners? So here's the latest. Governor, give millions a year to ancestral landowners. Let's take a short break and we'll this one.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup.
Including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal Opportunity Lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
So here we go, back on Tall Tales, just a few minutes before the big halftime show, Rogues Gallery, etc. So I'm talking about millions of dollars a year to ancestral landowners. Lawmakers should appropriate $10 million this year and a $2 million a year moving forward to help compensate ancestral landowners, according to the governor, who this week submitted another bill to the legislature to reform the government's land bank. The appropriation in the bill invests millions of dollars into the trust fund, which is critical to providing the relief to the families. It was originally intended to assist, the governor stated. The Ancestral Lands Commission, created more than 20 years ago, is responsible for returning excess federal land to its ancestral landowners. There we go again. And for paying just compensation to those whose land was declared excess by the federal government but is being used by the government of Guam for public purposes. We can't let that happen, Jose. The land bank's balance is now $15.6 million. But the commission never paid ancestral owners because of unresolved questions about the law. According to the Attorney General's office, the law is unclear about which landowners are eligible for compensation. The Governor's Land Bank Reform Act 2023 would clarify the statutory mandate of the land bank. It would make the estates of all ancestral landowners eligible for compensation, even those whose land is still being used by the federal government and is unlikely to be returned.
And that means it's not theirs.
You would think so, yeah. And it will never be theirs. The money currently in the land bank comes from the commercial lease of Spanish crown lands, which does not have ancestral landowners. It's land owned by the Spanish government. Under the Treaty of Peace, those lands were ceded to the U.S. national government. The governor's bill would subsidize the land bank with annual appropriations from the general fund. Now, how does money get into the general fund, Jose? Do you know? Taxes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Come April 15, we're all going to have to pony up a chunk of money for taxes, right? And of course, when we buy almost any product on this island, ultimately 5% of what we pay goes to the government in the form of gross receipts tax. Okay, going on. This year, $10 million appropriation would come from any excess revenue collected by GovGuam this year, according to the bill. Excess revenue means they collected more taxes than they actually need to run the government.
It's not a profit-making model.
No. So shouldn't that $10 million be given back to the taxpayers?
Exactly.
Yeah. Leon Guerrero sent a similar bill to lawmakers last year, but the bill expired when the legislature's term ended without any action by lawmakers. The Ancestral Lands Commission this month voted to start investing. 20 years, and they finally decided, maybe we should invest that money. Besides that, John Birch, the executive director, said, my mattress has gotten so lumpy, it's hard for me to sleep at night. I got to put that money somewhere else.
Well, I hope the termites didn't get to it like the ancestral land records.
The maps, yeah. Yeah. Starting with an investment of $8 million, which will be managed by 2 local investment companies. If the governor's bill becomes law, the land bank would support payments to 2 different categories of ancestral landowners. Those whose ancestral land is being used or leased by GovGuam, and those whose ancestral land will not be returned by the government and will not be controlled by GovGuam in the foreseeable future. Compensation would be used on fair market value of the land at the time it was taken by the federal government or returned to GovGuam. Okay, now all of the land that was returned, you got 2 figures. Should we determine what it was worth when it was taken, or how much it was worth when it was declared excess and deeded back to the government? Guess which one is going to be a whole lot more than the other? The second one, yeah. Minus the payments, and this one sentence here. Yeah, okay, let's break for the big halftime show and come back to somebody who's trying to get in right now.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Suspensions for Memphis safety forces. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. 2 more Memphis police officers have been relieved of duty for their roles in what turned out to be a deadly confrontation with motorist Tyree Nichols earlier this month.
Former officer Preston Hemphill has not been charged, and neither has the 7th officer, who has not been identified. Hemphill is accused of using his taser prior to Tyree Nichols being beaten by the 5 other officers who've since been terminated in charge.
Fox's Jeff Paul, 2 of the city's emergency medical technicians and a fire department lieutenant have been fired for failing to properly render aid to Nichols, who died from his injuries 3 days after he was arrested and handcuffed. The arraignments have been set for February 17th for the 5 officers who've been charged with murder in Nichols' death. The police chief in Omaha says 2 police officers who were shot Monday night are now in stable condition. The suspect, with whom they traded shots while responding to a burglary call, was killed at the scene. The Biden administration telling Congress it will effectively declare the pandemic is over, but not for another 3 months from now.
The White House says it will end 2 national COVID emergencies May 11th of this year, more than 3 years after they were enacted. The announcement comes in response to House Republicans' push to immediately end both the public health and national emergencies. The White House claims that ending the emergencies abruptly would result in, quote, wide-ranging chaos and uncertainty. But House Republicans are already claiming victory, with Majority Leader Steve Scalise writing in a statement, the White House caves to House Republicans, going on to say the vast majority of Americans have returned to work and resumed their lives months ago.
Fox's Kevin Cork in Washington. More victims have been found from that deadly mosque bombing in Pakistan. 88 people dead, dozens hurt. The Sunni mosque was inside a police facility in Peshawar. America is listening to Fox News.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal Opportunity Lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy will meet Wednesday to discuss the debt ceiling and potential federal spending cuts, though the president has publicly said he will not link them. A Dearborn, Michigan man who joined the Islamic State group is headed to federal prison.
It took a federal jury less than 4 hours to convict 32-year-old Ibrahim Issi Musabli of conspiring to provide material support to ISIS. Musabli traveled to Syria in 2015, where he attended an ISIS-run religious training camp where he swore allegiance to ISIS. Nabbed nearly 3 years later by Syrian Democratic Forces, he was turned over to the FBI and brought back to the United States for trial. He could be sentenced to 50 years in prison. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
Democratic lawmakers in California have introduced a package of climate bills aimed at holding corporations accountable for their greenhouse gas emissions. The bills would require companies to disclose their carbon footprint to the public and ban the state's public pension funds from investing in major fossil fuel companies. 2 monkeys were stolen from the Dallas Zoo Monday. It's the latest in a string of odd incidents at the zoo, including fences being cut and the suspicious death of an endangered vulture recently. No arrests have been made, and police are not sure whether the incidents are connected. A sheriff in Florida facing a lawsuit over his social media postings.
You've heard of the game show Wheel of Fortune. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey uses his Facebook account to spoof the television show, only he calls it Wheel of Fugitives. It's an effort to raise public awareness of those fleeing law enforcement. But David Gay says he was featured in a post but wasn't on the lam. He was in jail at the time on a domestic battery charge. Gay says he lost his job because of Sheriff Ivey's social media claim. He's now suing for $50,000. Tom Graham, Fox News.
Wall Street down Monday, the Dow losing 261 points, NASDAQ down 228. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management, the number 647-5003, or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com. All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizama. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatnya location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
What a great-looking group of people there in Rogues Gallery, Jose. I think I saw Sandra Regis, didn't I?
Sandra Regis and her mother.
And her mom. That's the way to do it, guys. Yeah. Sandra Regis and her mother, both of them proud tailgaters. Good going. Jose, tell the folks how they can get into Rogues Gallery themselves.
All they have to do is point their browser to thepoint.gu, and that's the official website of this radio station. Go on to the link that you click on that has a T-shirt and the beard. It'll bring you to the purveyor. Order your shirt. When it arrives, put that shirt on, take a selfie, and send that selfie to the Point's WhatsApp at 671-797-8255, and you'll be included in this Rogues Gallery Roundup.
Very good, Jose. Thank you. So we'll be looking forward to seeing your picture right there in Rogues Gallery. I got mine in there even, right?
I saw it.
Yeah, me and Harry down at Touray Restaurant on a Saturday.
We had a couple editions in there, and I can't say that I recognize some of the people, but if you do send it, send your name too, so we can recognize you.
I recognize Tomas Betnatu in there. Yeah, it'd be nice if you unless you want to let your face do all the talking. That's okay. If you want to send your name, either way you like it.
Henry McLonia, the brand new edition.
Okay, probably all the way from Barstow, huh? Okay, so I'm back here on the governor's land bank. Let's give $10 million to people who own land for which they've been paid twice. Compensation will be based on the fair market value of the land at the time it was taken by the federal government or returned to GovGuam, minus any payments received by the landowner for their property. Compensation would be paid to the estate of the land's ancestral owner. But accepting money means waiving any further... Oh, that's unfair. You mean people could only expect to get paid for the land twice? Wow.
Got to put a limit.
Payments would be in an annual installment for up to 40 years, the bill states, in amounts that can be sustained by the financial disposition of the land bank. In other words, this is the group of astute investors that finally decided, now that we got $15 million, maybe we should invest it instead of just keeping it in our checking account. Wow. These amendments will provide a long overdue method of just compensation previously denied to families whose lands the federal government seized. Yeah, and a little propaganda here now. How do we know that the national government didn't pay just compensation either of those two times? Well, everybody knows it was so unfair, right? You know, they say... And you know, when we do the read-in, we go into that every month, don't we, Jose? And that's all I've ever heard. Well, you know, they say that the people were so grateful for liberation that they just gave the land away, and on and on and on. If you want to take money, if you want the government, my government, to give you money, you got to have something more than a wish and a prayer. And then instead of saying the government seized, the government didn't seize it. The government took it in an eminent domain proceeding. And there are all the procedural safeguards that go with any case filed in the U.S. District Court of Guam. Seized would be something that would happen like you've read about asset forfeitures, you know, where somebody is caught selling drugs and he's got $20,000 in his backpack, and the feds seized the $20,000. That's seized. That's not eminent domain. Huge difference. Sometimes they like to sneak in the word, our land was confiscated. Not the same thing at all. And, you know, when you're in the newspaper business, you deal with words. You should pay at least as much attention to them as I do. The governor asked lawmakers to promptly schedule a public hearing. moving this legislation forward will help to deliver on the promise of the original land bank legislation, she stated in a letter to Speaker Titlahi, who is chairman of the Land Committee. So let's just stop here and figure out what we're talking about. First of all, I would like to know how many payouts we could expect. And no one should even think about advancing a bill unless he, she, or they are able to say, this is the number of parcels that were taken by eminent domain. This is the number of parcels that were given quitclaim to the government of Guam, that were quitclaimed to pre-condemnation owners. You do a subtraction. So therefore, we have this number of claimants, okay? And assume that you would assign a value to each one of those claimants, and you can do that, either the fair market value at the time it was taken, which is probably in the condemnation papers, right? So you ought to be able to figure out exactly how much money is going to be paid and to how many people. Now, given that, you know, the progress of this whole thing, I would suspect that if there are any more than 2,000 claimants, it would be a lot of folks. Population of the island right now is 154,000. So the 154,000 minus the 2,000 are going to have to pay this bill. How anxious am I to be paying money to someone who was paid by the national government twice for the same piece? Well, not very anxious at all. Now, I go back to that song that I always sang at the beginning of the show. What I'm looking for is an efficient, effective government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services on at least a break-even basis. So does a basic government service consist of wealth redistribution? Does it mean taking money away from some people and giving it to other people? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about wealth redistribution. If we were to operate this like Red Cross or the Community Chest and have a nonprofit corporation who would say, you know, a lot of these people own land that was condemned, and, you know, we don't think they got enough money, so let's all chip into this nonprofit. We'll give, how many people would contribute?
Zero.
Nobody would. So what we use here is what libertarians called state violence. Libertarians, when they use the term state violence, mean that when the government decides that you have to do something and you don't do it, ultimately, physically, you will be put in an uncomfortable position. You will wind up in the Crossbar Hotel. So if you don't pay your taxes, you cheat on your taxes, you run a really good chance of winding up in jail. So knowing that the government can do this to you, people don't like it very much, but they'll say, yeah, I'll pay my taxes. The only reason that people they don't pay their taxes because they're so enchanted with the work the government's doing. They do it because they have to. So come April 15th, I got to file a 1040 and I got to pay taxes. I got to pay taxes on every cent that I make right here in this talk show. And if my tax money goes for a decent highway system, a decent hospital, good schools, you know, what we would refer to as public goods, I shrug my shoulders and say, well, okay, at least I'm getting something back. But for my taxes to go to a very discrete number of people who got paid for their land twice does not warm my tummy. As a matter of fact, it tends to tighten my anal sphincter somewhat. And that's, you know, I'm not saying anything that's really popular, because, you know, the guy over there in the lazy boy chair is going to say, well, yeah, you know, all the original landowners were Chamorros, which, and ordinarily when you say that, then you're supposed to shut up. You know, if you're not Chamorro, well, then I guess I better be quiet.
Well, see, those are the kind of people that don't read up on history, don't know current events. I always bring up the Kello versus New London because I lived in Connecticut when that happened. This person didn't want to give up their house that was getting compensated by New London, even though it was only meant for a shopping center to be built there.
Yep.
It wasn't a conventional eminent domain standard, but the Supreme Court ruled in favor of New London, and that person had to move out, and they still had compensation. Guess what they did with that property?
What New London did with it?
New London did with property?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. That property owner didn't get any money back, not offered that land back or anything because it's New London property or whoever was a part of that lawsuit. It happens all over the United States, not just on Guam.
No, it's just a general rule. So, to say, well, it's the Chamorros that were the original landowner makes it a little worse because then we're adding a little identity politics dimension to the whole thing. So I'm absolutely against this. And like I say, I know that for some people it's a matter more of faith than logic or reason and emotion. Well, their ancestors, they lived on that land for so long and they were attached to the land. It's not just a matter of dollars and cents. And we really saw how that worked when some of the property was given back to the original landowners. They got, yeah, and they flipped it and made huge, they got huge windfalls, like this whole northern wastewater treatment thing. Classic example. So I am not in favor of this. I think it's a dumb idea. I think it's grossly inequitable. Let's talk equity here. Grossly inequitable for the folks who. And there are a lot of them who really never own much of anything here in the island. People, Chamorros that have never really owned anything, that are not going to get any of this windfall. So, bad news. Okay, next item on the card is Troy versus the Post, PDN, KUAM, PNC, and the Pacific Island Times. And this ran today on Candid, yeah. And here's the headline: Operation Chronic, Part 2 of the Guam Police Department Corruption Investigative Series. Some of the police officers paid by your tax dollars and endowed with your trust to take drug traffickers off our streets allegedly have been long involved with some dealers who can't conceal their drug trade, allow meth to enter the island, take down their competitors, and in exchange for political protection, attack political opponents. These allegations are made by federal agents in a recently unsealed federal search warrant issued in 2018 for the cell phone belonging to indicted former cop John Boom Montanonia. These allegations are also contained in several other recently unsealed search warrants and in testimony by a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent in open court. So what Troy did was he went and got the search warrant affidavits, and he got the search warrant and other unsealed search warrants, and gleaned this information from public records. Once they're unsealed, they're public records. In other words, he actually went out and looked for something.
And this is versus Post, PDN, KUM, PNC, and PI because they did nothing.
It's not what those 5 media outlets did, Jose. It's what they didn't do. They didn't do squat. Now, if Troy can do it,
Right.
The federal documents come from several different criminal cases dating back to 2015, merging into a federal grand jury in Honolulu in 2018, and continuing today in what is believed to be the largest investigation into police and public corruption in Guam history. It's called Operation Chronic by the federal government, and it appears to be a RICO action, the same statute the feds used to bring down the New York mafia families in the 1980s. And by the way, you know who did that? Rudy Giuliani, yeah. According to these documents, the FBI has had the cooperation of several of these now convicted and imprisoned drug dealers against the cops. The U.S. Attorney's Office also has the forensic evidence linking the corruption conspiracy between the drug dealers and the police officers. We previously reported to you about the connection among 3 federally convicted drug traffickers, Ben Rios, Eric Aponik, and Audrey Red Wolford, to former cop and federal task force agent member John Boom Montanonia. We previously reported to you Mr. Montanonia's connection to former Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio and his meetings with Mr. Tenorio at Adloop during the time of the drug conspiracy. This was the same period Mr. Tenorio, along with former police chief J.I. Cruz, constructed and used the Mandania Task Force to attack enemies of Mr. Tenorio's 2018 gubernatorial campaign. We previously reported that Mr. Montanonia's arrest, indictment, ongoing criminal case, and repeated continuances for 3 years. The rest of the media has only reported to you that his arrest was based on witness tampering allegations. But that was simply the icing on the corruption cake. The majority of the case is about drug trafficking, money laundering, and the use of dirty cops and politicians to conceal the crimes from good cops. According to a federal search warrant of Boom's phone and there's a case number here in 2017, and recently unsealed, an FBI agent reviewed Boom's call logs and noted that most call activity was with Red Wolford and the phone number 482-3274. The number, according to FBI agent, belongs to Kenneth Montanonia. I further know that Kenneth Montanonia is a Guam Police Department captain and is the division chief of the Criminal Investigation Division of the Police Department, one of the documents states. This position also includes the oversight of the Mandania Drug Task Force. Guam Police Department CID is responsible for a majority of the criminal investigations for the department. Spread throughout these documents are transcripts of phone messages between Boom and Red. Along the proof of the conspiracy are messages indicating the money Ms. Wolford and Ben Rios were paying Boom was for the retired cop's use of other police officers known to him to conceal their trafficking of drugs and the money laundering occurring. So Boom was the bagman, according to this. Even convicted drug trafficker Eric Aponik has or is set to testify the conspiracy. The defendant is actively cooperating with the government on ongoing drug trafficking and police corruption investigation that involves multiple targets. The defendant will be a material witness in the trial of the United States versus John Montanonia. So going on, according to one of the search warrants, the fruits of investigation of another search warrant into Boom's cell phone reveal extensive text messages between Boom and Ken Montanonia, and the sworn testimony of the FBI agent that he believes Boom paid Ken Montanonia for classified police information about drug investigations. So the rest of what Troy posted is more of the same thing. You know, he names names. It's not something that he made up. It's something that he got out of these unsealed warrants. So Troy is acting like a real reporter. I suspect that neither Boom, nor Ken, nor Red, nor Aponic sent him press releases.
Well, that would have been in the other
That would have cut
media.
PNC out of it, wouldn't it? Yeah. So nice going, Troy. And this is only part 2 of 3. Part 1 kind of laid the foundation. So I'm really anxious to see part 3. And then, of course, we wonder, what will the other ones do? Post headline saying, pay no attention to candidate news. There's nothing to see over there. Please just keep moving along. Okay, next I've got Patrick Artero. And let's head for Chicago in the 7th inning stretch.
Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management. The number is 647-5003 or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
So here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the 7th inning stretch. That means I only got 2 innings left of this ball game, and I gotta do the best I can to hit that ball, right? Next item on the card is Patrick Artero versus the Department of Agriculture. Now, if I sound kind of questioning when I say that, it's because I am. This is a Nick Delgado story. Maybe Nick doesn't listen to Tall Tales enough, but you know, the Department of Agriculture is not a legal person. It has no legal existence whatsoever. So you wouldn't be able to sue it. And you'll see when I get into this story, this appears to be a 42 U.S.C. 1983 civil rights suit. And we know from the times that we've turned on the Law and Order notebook, like right now, that for civil rights suits, you can't sue a state or territory. You can sue a municipal corporation. You could sue a government-owned corporation. You could sue a village, a municipality, but you can't sue a state or territory. So what happens is that people who have civil rights claims against government entities sue a public official. That's how it's done. So civil rights suits are ordinarily somebody versus so-and-so, the chief of police or whatever, right? But not the Department of Land Management. So it's kind of hard to tell what is going on here by reading this story. Here's what it says. A U.S. Army veteran is suing the Guam Department of Agriculture, alleging discrimination. He's taking the government of Guam to federal court. Well, there we go again, see? And now the island's public sector now responding, claiming that the former employee is not entitled to any relief, asking a judge to dismiss the complaint. So I suspect what's happened here is that there was a suit against Chelsea Munya, who is the director of agriculture. That's how you can do it. And oftentimes when plaintiffs do these, they'll throw in the name of the department. Although it's not necessary, it's really superfluous. Story goes on to say Patrick Artero has been a commodity inspector with the agency since 1994. A month ago, he sued Guam in the district court alleging discrimination on the basis of disability, documents state, both mental and physical impairment connected to his time as an infantry soldier. He also alleged he was not given reasonable accommodations, detailed to a lesser job, damaging his chance to advance in his career, subjected to disparate treatment, and retaliated against for participating in the equal employment opportunity process. The most serious allegation alleged, Artero argues, he reported to the Guam OPA that funds tapped to address invasive species was being used for the other reasons like salaries for employees not connected with the invasive species fund. So in addition to the other things, he's also a whistleblower alleging retaliation. The complaint, he alleges, caused leadership to put him in a hostile work environment, making disparaging remarks about his medical disability and age. Well, he struck a nerve with me there, this thing about age, right? Artero also alleged he received threats. Assistant AG Yusuke Hafferman Udagawa, responding to the complaint, stating agriculture denies the allegations. Agriculture denies the allegations. So apparently Artero is saying that an assistant attorney general threatened him with something. But the Department of Agriculture denies that. Still, Artero contends he was subjected to intentional infliction of emotional distress resulting in mental anguish. Artero wants to be reinstated to an appropriate position, back pay among the benefits. He also wants compensatory and punitive damages for the emotional harm, etc. GovGuam contends Artero failed to file a government claim for the case and shouldn't be heard in the District Court of Guam and dismissed. Artero seeks relief under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act. But it's relief the AG's office agrees he has no right to. So he's not doing a civil rights, he's doing an ADA and Rehabilitation Act, which kind of covers the same ground. It's a little hard to know exactly what's going on there because I don't think Nick Delgado really studied the complaint enough before. If he had the complaint, maybe he didn't even have the complaint.
There was a settlement back in 2017 between the Department of Agriculture and Patrick Artero.
There was.
Yeah, $20,000. Is this related?
Where did you find that?
It's on the Guam Post, Daily Post.
Really?
So, yeah, this is interesting.
That must be a new article.
That one's from 2017. Yours is a new article.
You looked it up.
I looked it up because I was looking up, the subject matter. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Send me the link, will you, Jose?
Will do.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sure we haven't heard the last of that. I'm going to scout around and see if I can get a hold of that complaint. Okay, next one. Next one is very interesting. I don't quite know what to make of it. I suspect tomorrow's paper will shed a lot of light on the article, on the next item on the calendar. titled Carl versus Milton Morinaga, the chairman of the Visitors Bureau. And I have several papers here that were mailed out by the Visitors Bureau, and one that was mailed out by Won't Parkinson and Jesse Lujan. Yeah, now there's a, poker players would say there's a pair to draw to. First item I'm looking at is a letter of transmittal from the Visitors Bureau to Doug Moylan, our Attorney General, by Valerie Sablon, the Executive Assistant to the President and CEO of the Visitors Bureau. Now, we know that the President and CEO of the Visitors Bureau is none other than Carl. And this is what was transmitted to Doug Moylan. The GVB BRCC report. BRCC, my memory tells me, means Business Risk Committee something or other. Remember when the board decided they weren't going to have any more meetings, and they decided to appoint several people to go through the bylaws and the Enabling Act for the Visitors Bureau and determine if the bylaws were out of sync with the statute? And the outfit that was doing this was the Business Risk the Business Risk Committee. And we saw news that they'd finished. So now Carl is sending a copy of that report to the Attorney General. Now, my suspicion, I haven't seen it, I'm going to try to get my hands on it, but my suspicion is that the reason that Carl sent it to the Attorney General is not because he figures that the Attorney General's subscription to Time magazine has expired and he doesn't have any good reading material. Next one is a transmission, same parties. Now, this is not from the governor. This is from somebody named Buggerin. Yeah. And this one goes, it's the same material as the BRCC. And this one is sent to Chairman Murphy and Executive Director at the Guam Code on the Guam Ethics Commission. So first the Attorney General, then the Ethics Commission. And then the next one I'm looking at goes out over the name of Vince Duenas. And this one is sent to the office, to Benjamin J.F. Cruz at the Office of Public Accountability. So why would officers of the Visitors Bureau, mainly Carl, be sending these things to Ethics, Attorney General, and Public Auditor? Too late for Christmas cards. I don't think it's birthday cards. And then we have two letters from Carl Gutierrez to Milton Morinaga, who is the chair of the Visitors Commission Committee Board, Visitors Bureau Board. It goes like this. Dear Mr. Chairman, I believe it's my duty and responsibility to inform you, and also because the board is about to meet, that on January 10, I sent the BRCC report regarding Guam Sports Events, Inc. That's the name of a company, Guam Sports Events, Inc., to the AG, Public Auditor, and Ethics Chairperson at our last BRCC meeting to review the report. All agreed that we send it to AG Moylan. Last year, you said in public that there was no director wrongdoing. But when we showed you the evidence, you said more than once that you were conned into incorporating the, what's the name of that outfit?
Sports equipment.
Yeah, I had it here right in front of me. Oh yeah, Guam Sports Event Inc.
Event, yeah.
So let's just call it the Sports Corporation, right? Guam Sports Events Inc., the Sports Corporation. Last year you said in public there was no director wrongdoing, but we've shown you the evidence. You said more than once that you were conned into incorporating the Sports Corporation. Conned into it. Of course, that presents the question, conned by whom? We have uncovered other facts which are troubling. There are innocent directors who should be informed before making decisions for the GVB. I believe you owe it to those innocent directors who may also be misled to tell them that the report was sent. How does that song go? Send a letter to Maria?
Is that the one where?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't end too well for Maria.
No. And then the next one, that was the January 28. This is January 30. It's Morinaga again. Dear Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned that you may not have the courage to inform the other board members that I have referred the investigative report to the AG, OPA, and Ethics Commission. It's really calling out Milton Morinaga. You don't have the courage. Please note that I am taking your silence as my okay to inform board members myself. As innocent directors, they deserve to know that they may unwittingly engaging in wrongdoing. Whoa.
He's laying the groundwork for something.
Yeah. This sounds like heavy duty, doesn't it?
I thought he just got the James Moylan bug and just wanted to write letters.
Yeah. Okay, and then James Moylan is gone, but his spirit lives on, because I've got a letter here from Milton Morinaga from Parkinson and Lujan. And the way the letter is framed, I'm going to see if I can show you this. You notice the heading on the letter? Parkinson and Lujan.
Are they attorneys now?
You know, it's not Parkinson A&D Lujan. It's Parkinson ampersand Lujan. That's sign that looks like an 8. It's called an ampersand. So it looks like from a couple of lawyers.
It does.
Yeah. So Parkinson and Lujan, it's not that two guys signed off on the letter. It's a lot more important. It's like there's an alliance here. Parkinson and Lujan.
Maybe they share the same typewriter.
So it's two Parkinson as were two Morinaga from Parkinson and Lujan. Subject, the special meeting of the Board of Directors, which was today. Half a day, Chairman Morinaga. Thank you for your service to GVB. The January 31 special meeting advertised today is no doubt a positive step toward rebuilding trust between the board, management, employees, etc. PHR has had 2 members on GVB board and lots of general members, so transparency and spirit of good government and public trust is perfect for a restart after the board's 8-month pause. Most important is that some of the incoming members of the GVB Oversight Committee would like the public to know more about this meeting before anything is official. Your help will go a long way to understanding what the board will do to give the public trust. I sincerely hope that you will address the points below ASAP, etc. And then he goes on to say, he reads the open government law, the boilerplate that said the legislature declares the policy of this territory, etc. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may return control over the instruments they have created. And then Parkinson and Lujan, it's kind of like Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello.
Frick and Frack.
Frick and Frack. What were those two guys that had the tigers? It'll come to me 2 minutes after the show is over. Yeah. I think it's important for you to tell us how the meeting came about, since no one was supposed to be communicating, and the last thing the board did was say they would stop meeting until bylaws are fixed. Please address whose idea it was to meet and why it's important now. The public should know there was no backroom talk. That's a good question. So the board says, we're not going to have any more meetings, period, right? We're not going to have any more meetings unless the chairman calls one. We're not going to have any more meetings until the 12th of never. Just we're not going to have any more meetings. Now they're having a meeting tomorrow, which they noticed up. How did that happen? Did all of the board members get together on a conference call and say we should have a meeting? Because if they did, you know what's wrong, right? And Doug Moylan at the chamber meeting said if he's aware of anybody breaking the open government law, he's going to prosecute misdemeanor time. So that doesn't sound like much, but that's a really important question. How did this meeting happen? He goes on to say Abbott and Costello, Parkinson and Lujan, Penn and Teller.
There you go.
Penn and Teller.
Oh, magicians, but the wrong magicians. And now I know you're talking about.
Okay.
I'll think of that name.
All right. So Parkinson or Penn and Teller or Abbott and Costello or who the hell ever it was, Jones and Guerrero maybe, I don't know. Then he goes on. They go on to say the notice says that the Akihiro Tani and George Chu are being officially elected, but the membership did not elect them. Please explain what does, quote, officially elected mean when there has been no election by the members. Please also explain why the membership does not get a say in their election when their terms are up. Finally, please explain how these gentlemen were chosen instead of others and whether the others were asked if they were interested. Let's go to Churchill Downs and we'll come back to this, Jose.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dedido, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services that you want to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Now, this is really very interesting because it's actually these two guys, let's see, was it Dun and Bradstreet? No. Siegfried and, yeah, that's who it was. Yeah, Parkinson and Lujan, it's you know, it looks like a law firm, and they're using a form of leading questions that's a little bit sneakier than the standard form of leading question, which is isn't it true that Taney and Chu were never elected? They've got a very subtle way of asking these leading questions. Now, they're pretty smart guys. You know, Won't Parkinson has already impressed me. I know he's got a pretty good set of, pretty good occupation of his brain housing group, and so does Jesse. But you got to wonder, was there some help? Was there some kind of leaks or something like that helped them fashion this extremely powerful questionnaire? Or am I just a victim of, the bigotry of low expectations of these two guys?
Well, it's a good question because they're two different parts of what happened during the speaker voting. One of them is not a part of the coalition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very poignant questions. And Jesse's hasn't even been in office. Of course, he could have been following along. Okay, going on now with Parkinson and Lujan or Penn and Teller or whoever they want to be. And since the elected term for the 2021 directors will expire soon, please explain why this topic even came up in the first place. There has been no public discussion about bringing them onto the board, yet it is without an election and right before their terms are up. The public does not even know if Mr. Taney and Mr. Chu are interested in being on the board for a few days left of the other directors' time on the board. The public may have reasons to doubt this is a good thing for GVB and that it came from public board members who did not talk about things beforehand. Now, Parkinson and Lujan are just great guys, very charitable. Butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. They're not taking any part of this at all. They're just helping out the public. Yeah, they're just helping the public interest. All right, and we go on. It says on the notice that the board will make a motion to elect the board secretary, chairman, and vice chairman, but their terms are set to expire shortly. Please tell the public why this election necessary without an election of new directors by the membership. They probably also want to know who came up with this motion, and if it wasn't you, how you learned about it. This is great. Next, you're resigning, but this almost reads like Candid News, It's so sharp, so cutting.
Like inside information, like you said.
Next, you're resigning, but Board Secretary Jeff Jones is not resigning. You are electing his position. The public deserves to know how you found out that he intends to resign. If he's not resigning, the public should also understand how it is that the board can have two secretaries. The public should also know who are interested in being secretary, vice chairman, and chairman. We believe these are real important for the public since there has been no membership meeting and no discussion of anyone's interest. Yeah, I mean, it's it kind of shouts open government violation, doesn't it? I think you as chairman and head of an agency that is responsible for Guam's biggest industry owe a full explanation that comes from your own words and thoughts. I understand you may want to ignore this letter. However, if you do respond to it, please give full explanation and treat this with highest respect for the legislative policy for transparency in government. The public deserves more than short answers that promise transparency and good intentions. They deserve to know what the instruments they have created are up to and how they formulated policies and why they took their actions. Signed by Parkinson and Lujan. I know I'm going to have a lot to do with this, a lot of stuff doing with this tomorrow. It's time for Joe Biden's boners time. This is something that we attribute to Joe Biden on June 16. The president regularly lashes out at journalists who press him on uncomfortable questions. Kind of like, what office are you holding? What's your wife's name? When reporters asked why Biden was so confident that Russian President Vladimir Putin will change his behavior after their 2021 summit in Geneva, Switzerland, he lost his cool completely. Quote, "I'm not confident he'll change his behavior," he shouted, jabbing his finger for emphasis. What the hell? What do you do all the time? When did I say I was confident? The outburst came after Putin appeared to outfox Biden by leveraging their private meeting for Russia's propaganda benefit. Why do you say that I said that? Yeah, nothing like Biden's boners. Are we there, Jose?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
You can't see them. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Justice Department has told committees in both the House and the Senate it cannot comply with their requests for information about documents marked classified and found unsecure at President Biden's home. To do so, an assistant attorney general has told them, could potentially compromise the special counsel's investigation. Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee, says that's ridiculous because the committee has oversight responsibility for intelligence.
If there's a risk here, how can we know if any damage has been done and whether the plan to mitigate that damage is sufficient if we don't know what we're talking about? Their refusal to tell us what was exposed is not sustainable, it's not acceptable, and I think you're going to begin to see us take action, I hope and I expect, on a bipartisan basis until they do.
Senator Rubio telling Fox's Hannity they could limit the agency's funding and block confirmation hearings for administration nominees. President Biden has told Congress he will extend the national emergency and public health declarations for COVID-19 for several more weeks and then end them on May 11th. Federal government will then treat COVID-19 as an endemic rather than a pandemic. The president will sit down with the Speaker of the House to discuss the federal debt ceiling tomorrow.
A delicate political dance. Ahead of Wednesday's meeting, the president insists he will not negotiate on the debt ceiling. But there's risk, especially if that position rattles the markets. The meeting is a major test for McCarthy. Conservatives want to see if the speaker shows backbone and can rumble with the president. The GOP demands deep cuts.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol. The city of Memphis has fired 3 members of its fire department, including a lieutenant and 2 emergency medical technicians, for failing to attend to Tyree Nichols the night he was beaten. 2 more Memphis police officers have been relieved of duty, including one who tased Nichols during the initial confrontation. The prosecutor says there could be more charges filed. America is listening to